Imagine this. A titan of the tech world, a CEO we'll call Ryan Holt, is told that the most brilliant mind in his billion-dollar company isn't in the boardroom, but is the woman sweeping the floors right outside his office. He'd probably laugh in your face. But what if it were true? What follows is a story that feels like a modern parable, a tale about how one overlooked woman, armed with little more than a mop and a mind that saw what no one else could, saved a corporate empire from the edge of disaster. It's a story that reminds us where true genius can hide. Our story begins not with a brilliant idea, but with a catastrophic failure. A single blinking red cursor on a screen, a symbol for a $200 million disaster. The company was NeuroCore, a giant in the artificial intelligence industry. Its CEO, Ryan Holt, had built his empire on logic and data. But for 3 agonizing weeks, his flagship project, an AI module codenamed Chimera, was dead in the water. The project, tied to a massive, non-negotiable military contract, was failing spectacularly. Millions had been poured into troubleshooting, flying in the world's best consultants, but every single one of them came up empty. The pressure was suffocating, and the deadline was just 48 hours away. Failure wasn't just an option, it was a speeding train heading right for them, ready to take out the contract, their reputation, and maybe the entire company. Ryan Holt felt like he was drowning. He lived and breathed code, but the Chimera glitch was a ghost in his machine he just couldn't catch. He paced his glass-walled office, the city lights blurring into a meaningless smear below as lines of code mocked him from a massive screen. His team, the supposed best and brightest minds in AI, were beaten. You could see it in their exhausted faces and the quiet, defeated slump of their shoulders. They were brilliant, sure, but they were trapped in a box of their own making, blinded by the very expertise that was supposed to be their greatest strength. Every day brought a new flavor of failure. They tried everything, rebuilding core algorithms, running every diagnostic known to man, stress testing hardware until it practically melted. The lead engineer, Marcus Thorne, a man whose arrogance was only matched by his resume, would present a new, fruitless theory each morning, his confidence visibly crumbling with every dead end. The air grew thick with unspoken blame. Whispers in the hallways turned to anxious chatter about layoffs. The board was calling every hour, their patience gone. Ryan had staked his entire legacy on Chimera, and now it was about to become his tombstone. In the middle of all this high-tech chaos, there was another person, someone so quiet and consistent she had become practically invisible. Her name was Maria Santiago. To the executives of NeuroCore, she was just the maid, the night cleaner who appeared after everyone left. She was a different kind of ghost, moving silently through the building, a shadow in their periphery. She was soft-spoken, shy, and never held eye contact for long. She was just part of the background, as unremarkable as the electricity powering their servers. No one knew her story or bothered to ask. No one knew that this quiet woman had once walked the halls of MIT, her mind lit up with the same passion for complex systems that now consumed them. They had no idea that a family crisis had forced her to drop out, trading a future in academia for a life of quiet service to support the people she loved. All they ever saw was the uniform. But Maria saw everything. While emptying trash cans, she'd catch glimpses of whiteboards covered in equations. Wiping down conference tables, she'd see discarded printouts of corrupted code. She heard the frustrated sighs and muttered curses of men who couldn't see the forest for the trees. To them, it was a crisis. To her, observing from the margins, it was a pattern, a simple, elegant flaw hiding in plain sight, a recursive error so basic that their own sophisticated training made them blind to it. She recognized it instantly, like a song she hadn't heard in years, but she didn't say a word. Who would ever listen to the maid? The night before the final deadline, the office was thick with the silence of surrender. The engineers had finally gone home, beaten. Only Ryan remained, a lone figure staring at the screen as if he could force a solution to appear. He felt totally alone, crushed by the weight of leadership. He had failed. He couldn't sit still. He pushed away from his desk and walked into the main office, heading for a coffee he didn't even want. The huge space was dark, except for a single pool of light at an empty terminal in the far corner. Ryan's first feeling was annoyance. Who was careless enough to leave their station on? He walked toward it, his footsteps echoing in the quiet. As he got closer, he saw a figure silhouetted against the screen. It was Maria, the cleaning lady, but she wasn't cleaning. Her cart was parked nearby, but she was leaning forward, her fingers flying across the keyboard with a sudden, shocking confidence. Ryan stopped dead in his tracks, his mind racing. Was this corporate espionage? Sabotage? He approached her, his voice sharp. "What do you think you're doing?" Maria jumped, spinning around with a startled gasp. Her eyes were wide with fear. She clutched a cleaning rag to her chest like a shield. "Mr. Holt, I'm so sorry, sir. I was just about to wipe down the keyboard." But Ryan's eyes were glued to the screen. She hadn't been typing nonsense. She was in the core of the Chimera project. He saw the changes she'd made, a few simple, elegant lines of code. It was impossible. "You were writing code," he stated, his voice a low rumble. Maria's face flushed with panic. "No, sir, I noticed a pattern. I saw it on the whiteboards and I thought..." She trailed off, unable to explain the impossible. Ryan's anger started to morph into pure confusion. He pointed a shaky finger at the screen. "That string you just wrote. What is it?" Resigned, her voice barely a whisper, she explained, "It's a lateral bypass for the recursive error." The technical jargon sounded bizarre coming from her. Your neural mapping solution is in a feedback loop. It's looping back on itself at layer 4 instead of advancing. The error isn't in the new code, it's in the foundation. This bypass, it should fix it. As she spoke, something incredible happened on the screen. The waterfall of red error messages flickered, hesitated, and then one by one, turned green. A system diagnostic that had been frozen for weeks suddenly completed its run. The Chimera project's main interface, which no one had seen fully functional in a month, loaded perfectly. The blinking red cursor of death was gone. In its place, a single, steady message glowed. System online. All processes nominal. Silence. The hum of the servers seemed to grow louder. Ryan stared at the screen, then at Maria, then back at the screen. His entire team of world-class engineers had failed, and the cleaner had fixed it. In seconds. How? Ryan finally breathed. How did you do that? Maria looked down at her worn-out shoes. I studied this, she said softly. At MIT. I was in the advanced computer science program before I had to drop out. The confession hit him like a ton of bricks. An unfinished degree from MIT. Ryan Holt, the man who prided himself on finding the best talent, realized the most brilliant person in his company had been hiding right under his nose. He wasn't angry anymore. He was stunned. He was humbled. And he knew everything was about to change. The next morning, you could cut the tension in the NeuroCore boardroom with a knife. The board and the senior engineering team were there, ready to hear Ryan officially announce the failure of Project Chimera. Marcus Thorne, the lead engineer, was already rehearsing a speech to deflect blame. Ryan walked in, his face unreadable. He stood at the head of the table, letting the tension build. He looked at the faces around the room, the best, the brightest, the most expensive people money could buy. Good morning, he began, his voice calm. We're all here to discuss the failure of Project Chimera. He paused. A failure that, as of last night, has been completely resolved. Confused murmurs filled the room. Marcus Thorne frowned. Resolved? What are you talking about, Ryan? My team hit another dead end last night. Your team didn't solve it, Marcus, Ryan said, locking eyes with him. For 3 weeks, this company's greatest minds stared at a problem none of you could solve. The person who did isn't in this room. He nodded to his assistant, who opened the door. In walked Maria Santiago. She wasn't in her uniform. Ryan had insisted she be there and had his assistant find her a simple professional suit that morning. She looked nervous, but she held her head high, her quiet dignity a stark contrast to the arrogance that usually filled the room. The silence was deafening, broken only by a scoff from Marcus. What is this, Ryan? He demanded. A joke? She's the cleaner. This, Ryan announced, his voice ringing with authority, is Maria Santiago, the woman who single-handedly saved us from losing a $200 million deal. Last night, she did what none of you could. The room erupted. One of the board members, a stern man named Lindell, scoffed. You're telling us the cleaner fixed a multi-layered neural architecture problem. What was it, a lucky guess? Ryan's eyes narrowed. She didn't fix it with luck. She fixed it because she understood the code better than any of us. He turned to Maria. Maria, if you would. He gestured to the main screen, which showed the corrupted code from the night before. All eyes turned to her. In front of the very people who had never bothered to learn her name, Maria took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was soft, but clear and confident. She didn't just show them the fix, she explained the why. She broke down the flaw in their logic, the simple recursive error they had all missed because they were looking for a complex bug, not a fundamental mistake. Then, with everyone watching, she recreated the solution live, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the fluid certainty of a master. When she finished, there was a stunned silence. Then a junior engineer started to clap, then another. Soon the entire room was on its feet in a standing ovation, everyone except Marcus Thorne, who sat there, his face pale with humiliation. He had been shown up, publicly and completely. Ryan let the applause fade. He looked at Maria, a real smile spreading across his face. "Maria Santiago," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I believe we have a position to fill. Effective immediately, I am naming you Head of Systems Architecture for the Chimera project." He hadn't just given her a job. He gave her a title that leapfrogged her over every single person who had ever looked right through her. He turned to the stunned board. "If anyone here has a better candidate for the job," he challenged, "speak now." Complete and utter silence. In that moment, Ryan Holt didn't just save his company, he shattered its culture. The story of Maria Santiago at NeuroCore didn't end in that boardroom. It began there. Under her leadership, the Chimera project didn't just survive, it thrived. She optimized systems and mentored junior engineers with a humility that fostered real innovation. The tale of the maid who saved the $200 million project became something of a legend in the tech world, a powerful story about the immense, untapped value of hidden talent. It became a wake-up call for companies to look beyond credentials and job titles to see the true substance of a person's mind. A story like this is a profound reminder that brilliance isn't confined to corner offices or Ivy League degrees. It can be found in the quietest corners and the most overlooked people waiting for a single opportunity to shine. It reminds us to look deeper, to see the person and not the uniform, and to remember that the most valuable asset you can have might just be the one you never thought to look for. If this story inspired you, and you believe that true talent can be found anywhere, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more incredible stories that prove greatness can come from the most unexpected of places. What do you think is the biggest barrier to recognizing hidden talent in the workplace? Let us know in the comments below.